Hello everyone, and welcome to this brand new YouTube channel. In this first series of videos, we're going to be talking in detail about PAX Pamir 2nd Edition. This game was designed by Cole Worley, and specifically the single player game, which we're going to be focusing on, was designed by Ricky Royal. I like this game a lot for a lot of reasons. I've played it dozens of times now at all player counts and really think that it shines at each of those player counts. I really do like the solo experience a lot. My preference here is to play solo board games against an AI opponent instead of your traditional score optimization single experiences such as Agricola, for example. And I particularly think that this AI is really well implemented. It seems very lifelike as you're playing. It oftentimes makes decisions and choices that I think a real human player would make. So I'm excited to show it to you. Perhaps you own this game and you've never played it solo, or you were intimidated by the rules, which can be a little bit finicky at times. So that's why I'm creating this series, so that hopefully you can visually learn how to actually play with the Wakhan, the AI, and dive in. I encourage you to do so. I guarantee you will make some mistakes or miss some rules, but regardless, it will still be fun, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to this channel. It is new. We're planning to do a lot of videos in the future, and please leave some comments about what you liked or didn't like. And with that, I'm going to get the game set up, and I will see you on the other side. All right, welcome back, everybody. So in this video, we're going to run through each of Wakhan's rules and give an in-depth explanation of what they mean. We're going to show some examples so that you really have a good understanding of how the Wakhan works. Perhaps you're a more visual learner, and the rule book, while it is good, it poses, I thought, a lot of questions and scenarios that I think is just easier to kind of see visually. So that's what this video is going to be about. If you're already familiar with the Wakhan, then you might want to skip this video and take a look at some of our playthroughs, where we're going to actually just go through and play the game against the Wakhan to give some additional examples of gameplay. So with that, we're going to get started. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is actually how Wakhan does her turn. So in the rules, it says that she's going to flip over the top card from the AI deck each time it's her turn. And she's going to go ahead and do two actions. She's going to go straight down the list of available actions to her, and she's going to keep going until there's one that's valid. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple examples of how this is going to work. Okay, so we now have an example set up. So this is Wakhan's first turn, and on the start of each of her turns, she's going to flip over the top card of the AI deck. So we're going to do that now. And you can see that when you put the top card to the right of the deck, they kind of work together. So there is an arrow here and an arrow here, and those reference the left side of the deck. But for this first portion, we're not going to worry about those arrows. We're just going to look at the available actions that she has on her turn. So to assess her turn, we go straight down this list. So the first action that the Wakhan is trying to do is build. So once we see that, we take a look at her court, and we see if she has that action available to her, and she doesn't. So all we do is we skip over that action, and we go to the second one, which is move. Now if we look back at her court, you'll see that she does have the move action available to her. In fact, she has two choices, two court cards that have the move action. So we need to break this tie somehow and determine which of the two moves she's going to use. In order to break any ties when it comes to court cards, we look and reference this card that came with the game. And the top part specifically, it says general card priority. So here we have a tie that we need to have broken. The first tiebreaker is whether it's on an opponent's card. Well, obviously, she can't use actions that are on my cards, so we just skip over that. The next tiebreaker is whether the card matches the favored suit. So if we look back here, we see that there are two different suits that the move action is available on. So if we take a look here, we see that the favored suit is military. So that means she is going to use this move action on this card. So the tie has been broken. This is the card she's going to use, and she would go ahead and do this move action. Once she's done, we go back to her actions list. Now, what's important to note here, and isn't incredibly clear in the rules, is that since this was a free action, she actually is going to go to this list and continue on until she's done two of her actual paid actions. So the next thing she's going to do is Radicalize, and she's going to be able to complete that action. She always can. And then she's going to go back to the top. So you see at the bottom it says, if actions remain, return to the top. So she's going to attempt to build, but once again, she doesn't have the build action available to her unless in her first action she radicalized a card that gives it to her. So then she's going to go and do a move again. And now, since she's already used the move on this card, she only has one more available, so she's going to go ahead and use this move, and that's going to complete her two paid actions. Once she's done with two actions that she had to pay for, then she goes ahead and looks at the rest of her court, and if there are any other court cards that would be bonus free, so matching the military suit, she would be able to do the actions on those cards. And the way that she does them is she just looks at each action available and goes left to right until she can either do one, so it's a valid move, or she exhausts all the actions and that card she just can't use. Okay. The next set of rules we're going to talk about have to do with the special Wakhan action known as Radicalize. Now, this is a custom action that is only available to the Wakhan, and essentially what it is that it's a combination of a purchase and play. So being an AI, the Wakhan is given a little bit of an advantage and a leg up by having the ability to buy a card from the market and put it immediately into play. So the way that Radicalize works is there's actually two forms of it that you will encounter on her action card. So if we look back here, you'll see the first one has some qualifications to it. So that's a qualified Radicalize, and the other one, the bottom one, just says Radicalize. So we refer to that as unqualified. So if we start and take a look here, it says that we're going to radicalize the highest ranked political card. So if we dive into the market, we'll see that there are a few different political cards here. So there's this one in the 0 spot, there's this one in spot 4, and there's another one on the bottom row of spot 4. So if we just look at this, we know that she is interested in the highest rank political card, which would be this one here, obviously, in spot 0. So she would just grab this card and put it directly into her court. Now, if the example were switched, and this were here, then this is the card now that she's interested in. However, sometimes you'll encounter that while this is maybe the card that she wants, she may not be able to grab it for a couple of reasons. The first reason might be that she doesn't have enough money. So perhaps she only has 3 rupees. So in that case, the deepest card from the market she could be able to afford would be this one. So while this is the highest ranked military or a political card that she could afford, she would have to buy this one. She would just go ahead and buy this one because it's the only one that's valid for her. Now, the other example of why she may not be able to buy this is perhaps in her first action, she bought, so let's just say it was like this. Perhaps in her first action, she bought this card here. Okay? So she went ahead and bought this card. And now we come across the action that she wants to buy the highest ranked military cards. Well, the rules still apply to her that apply to us in the base game, which is she can't pick up a card where she previously put a rupee this turn. So she wouldn't be able to actually buy either of these. So in that case, she would aim to buy this one. Now that's assuming that she has enough money. And if she doesn't, if she ever can't do a qualified radicalize, she basically just skips that action and she would go down and do the next one on the card that's listed. So now we've covered qualified radicalize actions, which are radicalize actions that have additional stipulations with them. Now let's talk about unqualified radicalize actions. So the bottom action of every card will just be to radicalize, and that is unqualified. She's just going to grab a card from the market and play it. And the way that this works is now we use these two arrows and we look at where they point to on the leftmost card of the deck. So if you see here, the first arrow we care about is the red one, and it shows that she wants to radicalize from the top row of the market. The second arrow is the number, the market space that she's going to grab from. So using these two arrows combined, we know that she just wants this card. So we would just buy it since it's free, and it would go right into her court. Now, in terms of where in her court it goes, we once again look at the red arrow. So here you can see that any new cards this turn are going to go to the left of her court. So we would just place it here, and then she would either finish her turn, take some free actions, or if that was only her first action, she'd start again at the top and go back down until she can do a second action. So let's do another example here. We'll flip over this card. And now you see she's interested in the top row still, but from the fourth spot. So a couple things could happen here. The first is perhaps if we put this card back, she wants this card here. Now perhaps she doesn't have enough money to afford it. Perhaps she only has 3 rupees. So all we do in that case is we work our way left until there is a valid card that she can afford. So if she only had 3 rupees, she'd put one here, one here, one here, and she would end up buying this card instead of this card, which is totally fine. So she'd buy this card instead, she'd put it to the left of her court, and that would end her turn. Now the other scenario that might happen is perhaps she bought this card, and she had a lot of money, and she was able to afford this card. And now she's going to encounter radicalize again. Let's say she didn't have a build action, she didn't have a move action available to her, so she's going to radicalize again. And this still says she wants the top 4th card. Well, the same rule applies. We just work our way left. If this is not an option to her, she'll then go ahead and spend money and buy this card. However, we know, as we just spoke about, she can't because per the base rules of the game, she can't buy a card that she previously in the same turn put a rupee on. So when that happens, we have to flip rows. And basically, we now are evaluating the bottom row, but the same qualification applies, that she wants the 4th card in this row. So she's going to go ahead and try to buy it. If she doesn't have enough money, then she just works her way to the left, and she would end up buying this one if she had no money. And once again, it goes to the left of her court. All right. The next series of rules that we're going to cover are known as Wakhan's ambition. And what that means is that basically in the rules, there are a series of conditions to follow where the Wakhan AI changes based on whether or not there's a dominance check in the market. And the rules, again, they do a good job of laying out how she's going to act. But I have found that this flow diagram, which I will link to in the comments, is very helpful just to kind of become familiar with what the different rules are when there is a dominance check in the market and how she's going to go ahead and conduct her turn. So if we go ahead and take a look at this, Basically, a couple times a game, I like to reference this just to remind myself and familiarize myself with how she's going to react. And I do this primarily whenever a dominance check hits the market. So here we have a dominance check, it's in the market. So instead of going straight down the action list of her new action card, I first look at this. And you see here that we're starting her action. So the first condition we come across is whether or not a dominance check can be purchased to score the most VPs. So we ask ourselves two questions. The first is, can the Wakhan afford this dominance check? So if she has $4, then obviously the answer there is yes. If the answer is no, then we just go down and continue on this flow chart. The second question we would ask ourselves is, can she score the most VPs? So that basically means, is there a dominant coalition? And if so, does she have more influence than us? Or if there isn't a dominant coalition, does she have more cylinders off her player mat than we do? And if the answer is yes, that she would score more VPs than us, and note the word there, most, meaning if there's a tie, then that's still a no. But if there isn't a tie, then she goes ahead and she purchases that dominance check, and then she scores points. Now, let's say the answer to either of those questions was a no. So we then come to this juncture, which is the instruction in unqualified radicalize? Well, as we just covered, we understand now what unqualified radicalize means. It's just the word radicalize in the movement, in the action box. And if it's no, then we go over here. Are the conditions for the action met, and can the action affect the game state? Yes, she does the action. No, she loops back around. So what that means is basically we conduct her turn normally for now. We encounter the first action, which is build. We look to see if she has the build action available to her and if she's able to take it. If so, then she performs the action. If not, we go and we skip that action and we go to the next one. So let's say she didn't have the build action available to her. Now we look at move. Same question applies. Can she do the move, and does it change the game state? If yes, that's the action she does. If no, then we come to this radicalize. So if we look back at the flow diagram, is the instruction an unqualified radicalize? Well, yes, in this case it would be. So we go on. Is there a dominance check in the market? Again, there is in this example. So the answer is yes. However, if there wasn't, then this huge block of text basically is just the rule set for the normal radicalize, which is she would radicalize from the top and she wants the fourth card. We've already covered that, so we understand it. However, in this example, there is a dominance check in the market. So the next question is there a dominant coalition? And the reason this is here is because the Wakhan, the Wakhan uses her radicalize action a little differently based on whether there's a dominant coalition or not. If there isn't, then she's going to radicalize the card with the most spies or tribes that she can legitimately get this turn. So she's going to ignore the red and black arrows here, and she's going to focus on cards that will put out cylinders, because there isn't a dominant coalition, and she's interested in either getting the lead or expanding the lead in terms of cylinders on the map. However, if there was a dominant coalition, then she's interested in patriots. She wants to get more influence than I have, so she would look back at the market and she would look to buy a patriot of whatever that dominant coalition is. Now, let's say, for example, she either can't afford the patriot or there wasn't one, then we basically just look back here and we go and fall back to the default radicalize rules, where she's going to use the two arrows to determine which card she's going to buy. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is Wakhan's pragmatic loyalty. And basically what that is a way to decide which coalition the Wakhan is going to use for her actions and for her turn. So the way it works is if we look at the top of each of her action cards, we'll see the 3 coalition symbols there in colors. And basically she just works her way left to right until she comes across a usable, valid coalition. And the reason why I say that is because the Wakhan will never do an action for the coalition that any of the human players are currently loyal to. So we see here that I'm currently loyal to Russia. So what that means is if she were to put out new clay, either armies or roads, she would skip over the Russians if we're going left to right, and she would do the action for the Afghans. So let's just do an example. It's pretty straightforward, but let's say she bought this Kandahar card right here. She would put it into her court, and as you can see, it puts out 2 armies. So if we look again at this, she's going to go ahead and put out 2 Afghan armies in Kandahar, and that would be her turn. Now the other example I want to cover is a card like this. So on this one you can see that it has colored armies on it. It shows that they're British armies. Now the reason these are colored are really just to aid the human players, to help us remember that, oh, this is a patriot, this could change our loyalty, for example. But for her, she completely ignores the colors every time she sees them, and she always falls back to this chart. So even though they're pink British armies, she's going to put 2 Afghan armies in Kandahar if she encounters or purchases this card. Okay, now there's a few other instances where pragmatic loyalty will come into play, specifically when we get into the Wakhan's actions such as build, battle, or move. However, I do want to talk through one other example that's actually listed in the rules, and that has to do with whether the Wakhan rules a region or not. Now, in the rules, it actually says that you should use pragmatic loyalty to determine whether or not the Wakhan rules a region. However, Ricky has since published an errata that says you actually do not use pragmatic loyalty for that. And as far as I know, this has been the only errata that has come out for Pax Pamir. But we're going to go ahead and talk through an example right now. So in this scenario, this is the action card that the Wakhan is currently using, and you could see that her pragmatic loyalty is Russian, then Afghan, then British. In this example also, I'm aligned with the Russians. So I'm loyal to the Russians. That means that her pragmatic loyalty is Afghan. So in this example we have set up, currently she rules Kabul. There are 4 units associated with her, 2 with me, and 3 with the British. Now in the original rule set as published, if something were to happen to one of her Afghan armies, and this were now the board state, she would actually lose the rule for Kabul because she's tied with the British. So this would actually come back. However, in the errata that Ricky published, which I think is a much cleaner way to play, he says don't worry about that. The Wakhan is actually loyal to all coalitions, so even though this is the game state, all you're going to do is count the total number of clay and use that to determine whether or not she's ruling a region. So in this case, she has 1, 4, 6, 7, whereas 7 units, whereas I only have 2, so she obviously rules this region. The reason that he changed this is because it became very cumbersome to every time basically you removed or added clay, you'd have to reevaluate whether or not she ruled a region. And sometimes that could be multiple times a turn, and then also because every time her pragmatic loyalty changes, every time she flips over a card, you had to reevaluate each region, and you were constantly adding and removing the token. So this way is much cleaner, and I find it a little bit more difficult as well, which I enjoy, because now the Wakhan rules a lot of regions fairly easily, and it's an uphill battle to try and take over her armies or become the ruler of different regions. Okay, now we're going to talk about the remaining 2 impact actions that she might get for purchasing a card from the market, and how she conducts her turn when she encounters those. So the first is going to be roads. Roads are fairly straightforward. So let's say that in the market she just radicalized this card and it's going into play. So the first thing we do is we look at her pragmatic loyalty. And in this example, it's going to be British. We are still Russian, so the first icon to the left is British. So she's going to build 2 roads in Punjab. And the way that we determine where the roads are going to go, we're going to use the series of symbols at the bottom of the current action card. So these symbols line up with each of the regions. So this here is Punjab, the circle, and you see that the circle is the first icon on the action card. So she wants to put out 2 British roads. We're going to look at these symbols and we're going to see where they go in Punjab. The first one we're going to disregard because that is Punjab. The second one is the star, which is Persia. Persia is not adjacent to Punjab, so we skip it. This is the octagon, that's Herat. We're going to skip it. The next is Kandahar, which is the square. So her first road is going to go in Kandahar. Now, obviously, her second road is going to end up going in Kabul, because that's the only other adjacent region. But if, in this example, she was only putting out 1 road, the way that you determine which region it's going to connect to uses these symbols. Same as if she was putting out a road in Herat, which is adjacent to 4 different regions. You'd basically go from left to right here, and you'd see that the first valid one is the star, which is Persia, and that's where the road would go. Now the second icon is spy. So let's say she's playing this Kandahar card. It's going to put out a spy. Obviously, spies go on a Kandahar card, and she has a decision to make. Well, as we already covered at the beginning, whenever she has a decision to make between which court card she's going to play, she's going to use this card priority. So the first priority is an opponent's card. So she's going to look at my court and see if I have a Kandahar card. I do. So she's going to go ahead and put the spy right on my Kandahar card. Now, if for whatever reason I didn't have a Kandahar card, or I had 2, we would continue to use this diagram here, go straight down the list, and this would be a series of tiebreakers in order for her to determine where she would put her spy. Okay, next we're going to talk about her specific actions. So in order to do that, we're going to use a player aid that is available on Board Game Geek. I will link to it below, but basically I find that this is pretty straightforward in terms of referencing throughout the game to know how she's going to actually conduct each of these actions. So the first one we'll talk about is gift. And basically, as you can see here, it says that the Wakhan is going to buy the cheapest gift she can afford to buy, placing it on her aid card. This gift counts as influence in all 3 coalitions, and that's because she's loyal to all of them. So real quick, an example there would be is if perhaps this was a free action, perhaps on her action card it said to purchase a gift. Basically, she would spend the money, assuming that she had it, to purchase the cheapest gift that wasn't currently bought already. So if this were the game state, she would spend her $4 if she had it to put a gift there. And once again, these gifts are they give her influence for all 3 coalitions. All right, the next we're going to talk about is build. And here you see that Wakhan's going to build armies of her pragmatic loyalty. So once again, we're going to use her pragmatic loyalty to determine which armies she's going to build. And we're going to use the region listed on the AI card in order to determine where she's going to put it, with the caveat that she needs to rule that region, obviously. And the other detail here is that she's going to spend as much of her money as possible. So if her free action, again, were to build, or her action card said to build and she had that action available to her, she would go ahead and do it. And it's pretty straightforward. Basically, we first assess if she rules a region. If she doesn't rule a region, we completely skip build and we don't worry about it. So in this case, she does rule Punjab. So we are going to conduct the build. And she's going to spend as much money as she can, and she only builds armies. So she doesn't worry about building roads. So if we look at her pragmatic loyalty, right now it's British, and I am loyal to Russian, so British is a valid move. So she'd go ahead and build an army in Punjab, assuming she had $2. If she had 4, she'd put 2 armies there, and if she had $6, she'd put 3 armies there. Now, let's say she rules 2 regions, and she's still looking to build. In this example, in order to break the tie between which regions she builds her armies in, we're going to reference the symbols at the bottom of the current AI deck. And you can see here that the first symbol is the circle, which is Punjab. So once again, we know that she's going to put those 2 armies in Punjab. If it had been the square for Kandahar, then that's where the 2 armies would have gone. Okay, the next action example we're going to cover is move. And if we look back at this player aid, basically it says that the Wakhan will only move armies and does not require any roads to facilitate. So that means that the Wakhan is never going to move spies. She only moves armies on the map. When conducting a move, she'll try to move armies of her pragmatic loyalty to adjacent regions where other players have tribes, using the region priority on the AI card to determine the choice between equally viable origins, so basically the tiebreaker. She will seek to have only as many armies as there are tribes in that region. Wakhan will not move armies if doing so would cause her to lose a ruler. So there's a lot going on this, but let's give an example. Here we have the board state, and the Wakhan has an action to do a move. So the first thing we're going to do is assess her pragmatic loyalty. In this case, it is British. However, if, for example, it were Afghan, she wouldn't do the move at all. There are no Afghan armies, so she would skip over that action. But in this case, it's British. So the next thing she's going to do is she's going to move her armies to where I have tribes. Now, in this case, there's a tie, Kabul and Kandahar. They have to be adjacent, but they don't need roads. So Kabul is a valid movement spot. So in order to break the tie between where she's going to move, we look back at the symbols here. So you can see here that the first one is Punjab, the second one is Persia, the third one is Herat, the fourth one is Kandahar, the square. So that's where she's going to move her army. The last thing to cover here is that she's only going to move as many armies as there are tribes here. So she is not going to move a second army here because I only have 1 tribe. So even if she had a double move action, she would leave it with just moving 1, unless, of course, I had 2 tribes here, and then she would move her second army to Kandahar. The last portion of that move rule basically says that she's not going to do the movement if that would mean that she would lose the ruler of a region. So in this case, if she wanted to move, this would be a valid move. However, because losing this army would now mean that we were tied in Punjab and the ruler token would go back, she's not going to do the movement. She wants to be the ruler if possible. Okay, the next action we're going to talk about is battle. So once again, we'll refer to this reference sheet. And it says that basically Wakhan will battle in the region where another player has pieces, and that's tribes, roads, or armies, and she has at least one army of her pragmatic loyalty, and that's important. If multiple regions fulfill this condition, use the leftmost region as listed on the AI card. So again, we're going to tie break with the symbols at the bottom. Once the region is chosen, she will try to destroy tribes first, then armies, and then roads. And if there's no region where there's a battle, then she is going to look at spies, and she's going to try to assess court cards to see if she should do a battle there. So once again, if we're going to look at a quick example here, let's say that she has a battle in Punjab. So she is aligned with the British, so we'll look at her pragmatic loyalty. She's aligned with the British, and she's going to do a battle in Punjab. Well, since she has British armies here, she's going to take out my tribe because the priority was tribes, then armies, and then any roads that might exist. So she's going to do one battle. She'd take out this tribe. If she were to do two battles, she'd take out the tribe and the army. And the other thing I want to emphasize here is you do assess pragmatic loyalty. So if this were the top card and her pragmatic loyalty was Afghan, she would not conduct a battle in Punjab. So that action would get skipped and she would go on to her next one. Finally, as the rule says, if there isn't a area on the map, a region on the map where she could do a battle, then she will do a battle on a court card with her spies. So in this case, there is an overlapping spy. We both have one. She would go ahead and do a battle and kill my spy. Okay, the next action we're going to talk about is betray. So here we see that Wakhan will betray the highest priority card with a loyalty prize where she also has a spy. She will always take the loyalty prize. Now, this example is pretty straightforward, but here you see the Wakhan's court, and let's say that this was the only place that she had a spy. So in this case, we basically know that because there's a prize here, she's going to betray this court card, assuming she has the $2 to pay for it, and she's going to take the prize. So this acts as a Russian prize that she's going to add, that will add to her influence. Now, if there was a spy, obviously, on my court card, or there were multiple spies in play, so let's say that her court card looked like this, her court looked like that, where she has a spy with a prize here and a spy with a prize here, that's when we go back and reference the priority list. So her first priority would be an opponent's card, so she would first look to take out my card, obviously. The next would be match's favored suit. So in this case, in this example, the favorite suit is military. Then we know this is the spy she's going to go ahead and take out. When it comes to betray, there is one other caveat that I want to mention, which I've run into a handful of times. And when I do run into it, I generally implement a house rule and do the action a little differently than what the rules state. So here in this example, you see that there are two spies in Wakhan's court. And let's say, hypothetically, that she has to do the betray action. So that's the next valid action, and she has $2 to be able to afford it. If we were to reference this priority flow and go down it, then you see that the second item that comes up is match's favored suit. So let's say this were the favored suit. In this case, she would actually betray this card, which would be great. However, let's say, for example, this were the favorite suit. Then she's going to go ahead and betray this card. And what that does, unfortunately for her, is when she takes the prize, that card was also leveraged. And if she doesn't have money to return back to the bank, then she actually has to start discarding cards from her court in order to repay that leverage, which I've had a couple examples where that just completely decimates her court. It wipes her out. So, in this case, even though the rules dictate that this would be the card to betray, Sometimes I'll go ahead and betray this card instead, only because it's the right thing to do and it's what a player would have done. So essentially, I'm saying that this priority doesn't really make the most sense for betray, and they almost need to introduce a custom priority, because I don't see why she would ever want to betray a card that matches the favorite suit anyways. Really this should be almost in reverse order aside from the opponent's card. Obviously she would first want to betray our card over any other. All right, we're on to our last action, which is the tax action. So once again, let's look at the reference card. Wakhan will always tax players instead of market cards if able. She will always tax from players with the most rupees first. If no players can be taxed, she will tax from the market, taking rupees from the leftmost cards, using the red arrow to determine ties. So this is pretty straightforward. If she rules a region, and that region is also a card that I have in play, she's going to tax me, assuming that I have the money and my rupees aren't in the tax shelter. If she doesn't end up taxing me, then she's going to tax the market, and she's going to basically take from the left every time. So if it were like this, she would take from this card, and if it were tied, so if there were 2 rupees on both of those cards, she would use the red arrow to break ties. So she would take the top 2 here, and that would be her tax action. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is the Wakhan's cleanup phase. So let's say that she is done with her turn. She's done both of her actions and any free actions. Now we have to assess her court size to see if she has to discard a card. So in this example here, you can see that she would need to discard a card. Her court size is allowed to be 5. That's the base 3 plus the 2 political cards, and she has 6 cards. So in order to do that, it's very straightforward. We just follow the bottom flow chart on this player aid card, and it goes through the priority in which she won't discard cards. So first, she's not going to discard political cards. So that's straightforward. She's not going to discard this one, and she's not going to discard this one. Next is she won't discard patriots. Well, aside from this one, which she already isn't going to discard, she doesn't have any other patriots. So that doesn't rule any out. She's next not going to discard any leveraged cards. Again, the 4 cards that are still in the tie aren't leveraged, so that's not going to help. Next is most player spies more than Wakhan spies. None of her cards have my spies on them, so that's not going to help break the tie. The next is fewest spies. Okay, well in this example, this card has a spy on it, so she's not going to discard that one. The next is lowest rank. So again, if we look here, these 3 have a rank of 2, so she's not going to discard those. And then the final 2 are matching favored climate, and that's going to be the one that breaks the tie, because these 2 do match the current favored climate, so she's not going to discard these, and the reason is because they provide her with free bonus actions, so she is going to go ahead and discard this card. The final tiebreaker, if it came to it, is lowest card number, and for that, you just use the card number in the bottom right corner and basically discard whatever one is lowest between the ones that are still tied. Okay, that concludes this video. Hopefully you found it helpful, and if you did, please feel free to like it and subscribe to our channel, where in the future we plan to do a lot more videos with similar content. And other than that, I hope it was helpful for you. I hope it helped to kind of explain how the Wakhan plays this game. And next you should check out our other playthroughs where we're going to actually play the Wakhan in a 1-to-1 matchup.